And this is a hybrid meeting with some of our speakers on by Zoom. And everyone, oh, Nick is on. Is that Nick?
Yes.
Nick,
Good morning, Nick.
hey Kev.
All right, so we have a forum. We're going to, first of all, amend the agenda to add a list of highway annual expenditures to as an agenda item. So I would make a motion to amend the agenda to add highway department item.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Back to the agenda, the minutes of the last meeting on June 1st. Any comments, corrections?
None here.
I just shared with Tucker just a minor amendment, not so minor amendment, that we just added Bob Hamill as being part of the process for the banking updates. Yeah.
Okay, with that change, I move we approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, public comments. So we are taking, this is a hybrid meeting, so the public is welcome to be here, but also we will take comments by email. And if anyone wants to send comments, you can email them to bosdistribution@kncc.gov. If we receive them in the course of the meeting, we'll retrieve them before the end of the meeting. We'll watch. Comments. That brings us to our special guest, Larry Kirshner, for our health plan update. Good morning, Larry.
Good morning. Nice to see everybody. I promise next time I'll be there live. Looking forward to it. So I'm going to go in and share my screen. So we want to talk about today, and this is presentation that we reviewed as part of the town's annual stop loss insurance renewal, and in conjunction with our overall health plan. So today, quickly go through just an update on how we're doing on the town health plan, since they are intermingled. The overall health insurance plan, as you know, we're self-insured. So we set a budget. We do a lot of work with Lunda, Cheryl, and Kevin on setting the budget, obviously, which we talked to you about when there's snow on the ground mainly. But obviously keeping you guys updated on how we're doing as we get near the end of the plan year. And then ultimately the stop loss insurance, which is the insurance that we procure to protect the town for high claimants. And we have for those of you that don't know, I'm sure you all do, that we have a program that we put in place a few years ago where we have the same underwriter for the town program and the Board of Education. So it's worked well in years where the Board of Ed's claim experience was poor. The town, fortunately had good, and we supported it, and vice versa. So the thesis is getting as much premium with one underwriter as possible to smooth out the losses under either program. This year, a little bit different. We'll talk more about that, where both the town and the Board of Ed have significant ongoing claims or significant ongoing exposures going into the next period for stop loss. So high level today, just recap how we're doing. Again, this is kind of a tale of two cities. So where we have a lot of red, as you see on this chart, that means we've had a lot of stop loss claims, and that impacts the stop loss renewal. We'll talk more about that in a second. But on a gross basis here, this is just a high level of a expense versus accrual or budget number. So through April, and Lunda may actually have more up-to-date numbers than I do, since we get our reporting a little bit delayed, but through April, we were running about 6% under the expected accrual or budget. So our premium accruals or budget was around $4.7 million, and we were running on a cash basis about $4.419 million. So we were running ahead or surplus position of about $272,000 through April. So great story. It's been a great story since we've gone self-insured. And one of the things we've done is have a stop loss level. And now we're going to kind of segue to the stop loss discussion and the meat of the conversation today. We have maintained $100,000 deductible under the stop loss program since we've been self-insured. And what's happened over time is that our experience has caught up with us in terms of the large losses, and parallel to that, it's just becoming more expensive. It's like your homeowner's insurance or your car insurance. It's just becoming more expensive to maintain lower deductible thresholds. So as claims continue to really graduate to hundreds of thousands of dollars and millions of dollars. When I started, if you hit $1 million, you were probably dead. Now we have claimants that routinely surpass $1 million a year in costs. So here's a quick chart on the couple years, 3 years, and pretty consistent. We had actually 21 large claims back in fiscal year 19, but the severity was down. So we only had 2.4 million exceed 50,000 annual spend. We had premium about $700,000, so our loss ratio was pretty good. Fiscal year 20, we went the other direction. We had about the same number of claims, but our claims went up to about 2.6 million. We had $1,057,000 in refunds, so our loss ratio ballooned to 127%. This year, through April, we're running pretty much on track. 17 people over the 50,000 for 2.4 million, $1.2 million now in stop loss refunds because our people have hit higher numbers that I was just alluding to in terms of their total claims. So our loss ratio is standing at 161%. So we knew this going into the budget cycle. So we were relatively conservative in the budgeting. We budgeted about, I believe, 25% increase based on stop loss insurance because we knew we were going to get hit hard. And keep in mind, stop loss insurance is not, it's a portion of the program. It's getting to be a bigger portion, but the portion of the plan in terms of overall cost, stop loss insurance is I would say relatively small in terms of our total spend. So here's an illustration, and we worked with Kevin and Cheryl and moved on this extensively with just regard around looking at higher deductibles. We've talked about it a lot. In the past, it hadn't made sense because we were not getting significant increases. This year, though, in light of the fact that we got a $200,000 increase, which we expected. Here you can see what's illustrated is maintaining the current $100,000 deductible. Our cost goes up to about 1.125 million. And then looking at the higher threshold. So we've talked a lot about this. The Board of Ed maintains a higher deductible. They have more people, though, covered. We've always tried to maintain stability under the program, so we've liked our $100,000 deductible. But obviously, we've talked about this in the past. The town has the wherewithal to take on more risk. We're not exposing the plan to significantly more risk by raising the deductible. So here, what we've illustrated is raising to either 125,000 or 150,000. We've recommended the 150,000. Mainly because we feel that based on the way the numbers shake out, and they differ from year to year, depending on what the underwriters give you in terms of decreases to the premium. So we think it's advantageous this year to save $300,000 out of the renewal and our budget, but we will have additional claims exposure. So what you see there on the bottom are estimates, and nobody has a crystal ball. So what we've illustrated is what the insurer expects the additional claims to come in under the self-insured plan to be at 125 and 150. And then at the bottom, we've illustrated what the historical, based on the actual, has been for the last couple of years. So you can see here that what we're really talking about is dollar trading, where we have budgeted about $1,125,000, I believe, and we would reduce our premium to about the 823,000 figure. So we would still have about the 350 or more, or actually probably closer to $380,000 of cushion for the expected claims, which will come in. What we also wanted to display whenever we have these conversations around raising deductibles is, well, what are other people doing? And here is an illustration that between 200 and 500 employees, most employers maintain a deductible level between $50,000 and $250,000. So I think we're right in the middle there, where we should be. And obviously, as I said at the onset, that we've had $100,000 for a long time now. So moving it up does not really give us much more exposure.
Thank you, Larry. Before we go to questions, I would mention that Larry made this presentation to the Board of Finance last week, and we thought it was appropriate that since the Board of Finance doesn't administer the plan, the Board of Selectmen should make this decision. And so Linda and Cheryl and I all recommend the $150,000 level. We could decide to go to the 125, but as Larry explained, we're sort of in the mid-range of smaller plans to the Board of Finance did several years ago encourage for the patient to go to 300,000. They have a larger population, younger population. So, questions for Larry?
Sure.
Good.
Hey, Larry, thank you. Appreciate this. Just a couple questions. The first one, quick one. So our underwriter is Blue Cross Blue Shield, and I think it's been that for quite some time. You go out to bid though annually? And
So our claims administrator is Anthem.
Yep.
Blue Cross in Connecticut. Our stop loss, we decoupled the stop loss insurance from Anthem a few years ago.
Okay.
And we had originally, I believe it was Berkshire Hathaway. And we've been now with this, with Voya for a couple of years. Yes. So to answer your question, we go out, there's about 20 reputable reinsurers out there that we go out to. Some are better than others. Everybody declined on the program this year, except the current underwriter Voya. And the reason for that is we have significant ongoing claims, and the Board of Ed has some really significant ongoing situations with regards to transplants, where the contract that we have a special contract with Voya and a couple of other carriers, and not to get into the granularity of this stuff, but it's going to be important this year. It's really going to pay off for the town in that we have what we call a guaranteed renewal provision, where they will not laser any individual, and a laser is setting a higher deductible on someone that has a known condition that's going to exceed the stop loss deductible, and a renewal rate cap of 50% on the go forward. So here, even though so when we go out to the market, we go out collectively with the Board of Ed. And this is one of those years that I said at the beginning, because the experience on both the town and the Board of Ed is really poor, that the market just was not competitive. Specific to the board, though, and this will come back around in further discussions, we have a transplant. We have actually two transplant situations. So in that regard, what happens is the underwriter they can set a laser of, let's say, $1 million or higher on a transplant recipient. And with our contract, what we have is a no new laser renewal provision. They are not allowed to do that. They can increase the rates up to a certain point, but they cannot impose lasers at renewal. So that's going to be a very big. So as we go into next year, knowing that we have those conditions on the Board of Ed, they're gonna hit the reinsurer very hard next year.
Okay, thank you, Larry. And just on the deductible, you and I had a chance to briefly talk about this, but while you have a premium decrease by going up to 150,000, you typically will then see the deductible increase. But as you pointed out, we've never been anywhere near the total deductible amount. So it's really.
No, I mean, you can see it right here. So we're at 4.49 million through, I'm sorry, we're at 3.4 million through 10 months. So even if we have, even if we end the year at 4.2 million in claims, our deductible next year is going to be either, it's going to be 5.6 million at the 150,000. That's because of the 125 to the 25% corridor in there. And like I said, it's got a better chance of snowing on the equator this afternoon. And that's why the premium rate that you pay for aggregate insurance is $29 and this rate for specific is $313, because it's a lot more likelihood of someone hitting 100,000 or 150,000, as we know.
And so I repeat this, and the proposal for 150 makes a lot of sense to me.
Hey, Nick?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, as Larry said, you're trading dollars for dollars, but I think it's appropriate to, go up to the higher D. Larry, just a question. I mean, what trend is driving? We're seeing the loss experience at both the Board of Ed and the town, deteriorate, frankly, over the past couple of years. What do you ascribe that to?
So that's a great question. I spend all my days doing it. It's a very depressing. It's one of those things, Nick. It's kind of good and it's bad. So specific to the town, our group's getting older, and our risk pool is really not changing. We have the same 200 or so people that we've covered for the last 10 years. And you're not a tech company, and you're not hiring, a bunch of young 25-year-olds, into the program. Although we do get some younger people into the program when you hire some police and fire. But for the most part, our risk is deteriorating a little bit. And what's also going on is that care is becoming much more expensive. And the severity of some of these illnesses are really hitting hard. And this isn't just a town of New Canaan issue. This is across our spectrum. So when you have, if we were to talk to, I don't care if it's state of Connecticut or United Healthcare or Cigna, Aetna on the insured side, the number one issue that we're facing is the increase in specialty prescription drugs, very high cost specialty prescription drugs. Now, these drugs are very, very good, but they're very, very expensive, and they're single source, and we're talking about high cost oncology drugs. We're talking about drugs for things like cystic fibrosis, very high cost injectable medications that you can only get, from one manufacturer that's setting the price. It's very, very difficult. Now, the good thing is these drugs are helping people live longer. Some of them anyway. There's a lot of debate about that in some of the oncology drugs, but going back to your question, that's really the main issue that we're facing. We're just, we got an aging group that's, developing some more severe illnesses. On the Board of Ed side, they had two people with transplants. So that's kind of an aberration. You're going to have that every, 4 or 5 years. But those people obviously, one I think is back to work. So again, very high cost, severe condition, a lot of spend. and that impacts the reinsurance.
Is the Board of Ed, um, is there a companion maturization in terms of aging, getting older as a cohort at the Board of Ed, or is that more stable because you get younger teachers supplanting retiring teachers?
It's more the latter. They have a larger group, and they definitely have an influx, more turnover of their risk pool than we do.
Okay.
And again, this is part of the, the big picture, right? It's like, if I'm a fireman or a policeman, I work in the town, I'm going to work there for 20, 30 years probably, right? It's a great, so, and part of why I work there is my benefits package. So versus a teacher, also similar, I would say, to, working in New Canaan, but bigger group and more turnover and an influx of younger people into that group.
Okay, well, I think going up to 150 is probably appropriate, and I think that the analysis that you provided with, with other employers and the numbers, and, I think that supports that. Decision.
And like I said, and I've been saying this a long time, this is insurance like you buy fire insurance, and the town can absorb a higher deductible. We especially in the surplus position that we're running on our health plan. So we're not in a situation where we're really taking on much additional exposure. We've budgeted this money, like you said, it's dollar trading, and the town has the wherewithal. If we're slightly off, we have the wherewithal to fund that.
Right.
So I would also mention, Larry's been with us. How many years, Larry?
Man, a long time. Probably back to like Cheryl, as long as you've been there.
Yeah.
The point I want to make is Larry's a tremendous resource and advisor to us. And when you're running your own self-insured plan, you need to analyze your risks. And Larry has always been great. In the past 5 years since we've been self-insured, we've saved a lot of money, and save a lot of money over the last 10 years. So we just have to continue to keep our eye on the ball with long-term savings.
Yeah. I thank you, Kevin, and thank you for saying that. Look, it's not like we're at the casino, but a lot of times, a lot of this stuff we're not clairvoyant, but like I said, we historically have really tried to protect the volatility of the program, because all of this, that first page that you see, ultimately factors down to what employees pay, because they pay a percentage of the cost. So we've really focused on the 100,000, keeping the volatility down. But now we're in a situation, I know I'm repeating myself, now we're in a situation where it just doesn't make sense to give the insurance company a guaranteed that much more premium when this year it doesn't. In years past, when we got much lower increases, it made sense. And you could see that from the experience. We've won, right, over the last couple of years. And the marketplace has seen that, we've torched them pretty good on the reinsurance side. So this year they came out and we were ready for them, and the numbers make sense. So we go there now.
Bottom line, big picture, it's one of the best decisions as a town financially that I think we've made. And I've been on the board for 10 years, and this was a big changeover, and maybe because I'm an insurance guy and used to set up captives for a living. I mean, I think it's been a win-win. I think we finally, Larry, this particular year we've got some headwinds, but that's the nature of insurance.
It is
for the long haul. This is the right way to go.
100%, 100%. We could really bore ourselves and put the stock prices of Aetna, United Healthcare, Cigna, and Anthem Blue Cross on the chart, and that'll go right to your point you just made, right? This is where we're trying to really get the money out of the casino and put it back in your pocket versus keep it in the casino's pocket. So it's a challenge, but thank you. Yeah, the town's done great.
Hey, Larry, I wonder, so the federal Obamacare legislation eliminated the ability to have lifetime caps. It used to be $2 million, $3 million caps on So essentially, plan sponsors were somewhat protected. So we're absorbing all that risk now. Is that much of a factor?
Well, you are, but you really, that this goes along the lines of what we're talking about. Yes, and that's, back when, like I was saying, back in the day when you had $1 million claim, the person was dead. So there are no caps. So this really hits the reinsurance world because our cap under the program, if you think about it, now, our cap's going to be 150,000, but the stop loss insurer, they have no cap. And that's impacting the reinsurance world.
That impacts our premiums, obviously.
And that impacts your premium, that impacts everybody's premiums. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's some horrific, we had a client that we picked up. We got one of the reasons they decided not to have stop loss. They had a $9 million claim. Out in California with a birth, multiple organ. It was an unbelievable claim. So that gets spread over the entire reinsurance industry. Although that in that instance, the employer took it all because they decided to be penny wise and pound foolish and not have stop loss. So.
Okay, with that, I thank you, Larry.
Thank you, everybody. Take care. I look forward to seeing you in person.
Okay, thanks. I would move we approve the move from $100,000 deductible to $150,000 deductible as described by Larry.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. It's just a supplement, it's just a deductible, this personal plan design, we're not.
The stop loss.
Just the stop loss. Good decision.
Okay, moving on to the sewer department. Jim Rogers, good morning.
Good morning. Shall we get up or?
If you would,
You can
please.
go right to the podium, yeah.
You have a number of annual budget items to approve.
You don't need to touch anything up there. You're good to go.
Okay. Good morning. I do have a list of,
Sorry for doing that.
There's one other item on our list on the agenda, the health insurance service fund. Linda, were you covering that under health plan? It's in our tablets, but
Oh, that was just backup to Larry's question. It was just providing, it had information on the budget. And Larry kind of talked about
Okay.
what we had budgeted versus how much we're saving.
No actions.
thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Jim.
okay, I have a list that I submitted to you. Do you want to go over each individual item or just answer questions that you have?
These are all out of the operating budget, correct?
Right,
So that's,
there's only just one change I'd like to make. That's the disclosure of the quality agreement. 0.145 per gallon, just like to put it back to the other 1 and 2.
Say that again, that's what,
That's the 1 and 2. CPI for year 345.
got that, Tucker?
That's what you negotiated with the
Summer
provider.
capital. Summer capital.
Oh, sorry, yeah, summer capital. Right. Do you want me to list the capital? Quick?
Well. Capital. Will those come out of the major maintenance reserve or do they come out of the operating? They're on the capital side, major maintenance reserve.
The clarifier unit is a capital item, 50,350. Horizontal bump, capital item. Okay, it's pumps are capital item.
So we're basically just approving all the budget items and their source from the operating budget with capital reserve budget. Right. Reserve. Questions for Jim? Nick?
None here.
Thank you.
Very much.
Both, Jim, in favor, both. I move we approve the request from the sewer department, enter into contracts and purchases for the items listed on our tablets, some of which are capital. Other operating. Do I have a second?
Second here.
Okay, seconds, discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, Tiger. Morning. Moving on to highways and byways.
Would you like me to do the highway first, or you want me to go to the,
Oh, go ahead. Well, actually, do you want to pick up the highway, the item we added to the agenda?
that'd be fine if you want. It's similar to what Jim just did. It's basically approval of our blanket purchase orders here based upon prior year expenditures. So it's individual ones per se. Similar to like last year, this time for fiscal 21. Everything's been budgeted for.
Any questions, Nick, about the highway items
None here.
we're added? Any questions?
No.
I move we approve the request from highway department, just the item listed on the tablets.
I'll second.
Discussion, all in favor? Unanimous. Tiger, thank you.
Thank you. So the next item will be line striping. Excuse me, this is for discuss the case with there's every 5 years or every year something to the road. So every 5 years the road gets touched. Line striping lasts anywhere from 3 to 5 years. So we look at the time that we come in, either crack seal or microfill overlay or pave. Into line stripe, so we ask for a quote for safety markings. They are on a state low bid for their procurement contract for the roads that we have slated this year. We have 13 roads that are either getting a micro fit overlay or cape seal, and we have 43 roads total that will see some type of line striping, either WL center line, you already have it, or new stop bars, crosswalks, things of that nature. So the subtotal was 55,443.58. And second things 800, total was 63,743. Money's available on our pension account.
Questions?
Just remind me, you said this was higher or lower than last year?
Lower than last year. Last year we were around 70,000.
Is that just because of the number of roads? or-
Just because of the number of roads, and I think some of them, the ones we were doing last year had about more settlement. This year. As I mentioned, there's only 13 that settlement. So
We approve the request from Public Works to enter into contract with St. Martin's Inc. for line striping in the total project amount of $63,753. Which includes things. $100. Second,
Second,
Kathleen seconds, discussion.
Hey,
All in favor?
Tiger. Hey, Tiger. Last time I drove down 123, the state's detour signs are still up.
I'll
Given that it's been over a month or two since,
And I had them remove the ones on Lapham Road that were there for 2 years.
I'll talk to the contractor today. Again, I should say, I'll talk to him again and see if I can get it. But thank you.
We try not to bother DOT.
Yeah, so you good, Nick?
huh?
Next one is seating of athletic fields. Yeah, this is a two-part. One where we purchased a seat from Tom Irwin Incorporated for a price of $15,037.50. And then look to championship turf for the application at $4,800. This is the seed or oversee the fields that we don't necessarily treat with pesticides. So Saks, Farm Road, track field, and all of the park baseball fields. The seed itself comes from Tom Irwin. It's a procurement contract under CROG, so it's a little bit on the Capital Region Council of Governments. And then the application under championship turf, we had gone out and requested pricing. Last year's work, they were the low bidder. They held their bid price for this application. So I'd like to have approval of those two contracts.
questions for Tiger on this one?
None here.
Kathleen?
So Tiger, on this is extra seed versus last year, is that correct?
This is right. This is actually trying to get a jump on what we had discussed, right? So we had monies budgeted for this coming year. We had some available monies in this year's budget. So we wanted to jump on it early. The thought being, speaking of John this morning, he's getting ready for graduation as well. He can't be here today. So we basically it's adding to our seed bank, so to speak, right? So the more seed we get out,
Right.
ground, the better the seed. Plus, prices are jumping through the roof, and want to get in on the low side before the seed prices jump. So that's the other thing.
So we had been seeding, if you will, those fields, which are the school fields that don't have pesticides. We're doing that twice a year or just once a year, and so now we're doubling that.
Right.
Okay.
Jump up.
And then if you would be kind enough just to remind us, when is the plan for applying pesticides on the athletic fields that are not?
Well, we do it when school's out, after school ends. It'll be at the end of June, early July, depending on the itself. June. And that those fields that we're looking at are Connor, Wake Park athletic fields, or baseball as well.
And then also Tiger shared a draft with me from John, how I just thought, I don't know whether you've shared that. I know you're still working at it.
We're still
Working on it, but I just, for my own review of what's being proposed for our website, town website, regarding the use of pesticides, and just sort of hopefully an advance announcement of what we intend to do, consistent with the proposal back in the fall from both myself and the Park and Rec Commission in terms of this notification. I think that'd be great. And John's done a draft and Tiger's working on it in terms of what that announcement would be on the website. So thank you for doing that.
well.
Question, thing?
None here.
I move we approve the request from Parks Department to purchase 64,750 pounds of seed from Town Irwin at a price of $15,337.50 and $4,800 for application of the seed bank championship turf. Second,
Second here.
further discussion? All in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, is David McCarthy actually joining us?
He's on. David,
Morning, David.
there he is.
Morning, everyone.
How are you, David?
Good. How are you?
Good. So you're counsel to the management company for the Canaan Parish?
I'm here on behalf of the Canaan Parish Redevelopment Limited Partnership, just to explain the need for the easements and answer any questions. Scott, as you might know, is away this week.
Try to introduce you and your role. Are you the manager of the management company or the attorney?
Heritage Housing, Inc. is serving as the development manager on behalf of Canaan Parish Redevelopment Limited Partnership. And so our role is to oversee the construction, development, financing of the project, and eventually hand it off to the long-term ownership when it's finished.
Great. Okay, thank you. If you would explain the utility easements that we're being asked to approve.
Sure. It's a pretty straightforward request. The Canaan Parish project is actually developed on land owned by the town, and it's been owned by the town the entire time Canaan Parish has been developed. The town leased the land to first New Canaan Neighborhoods, Inc., and then later assigned that lease to Canaan Parish Redevelopment Limited Partnership on a long-term basis. But being that the town is the landholder, town council believed that the easements should be executed by the town. There are two easements being requested at this time. The first is in a water easement with Aquarion Water Company to bring the water lines onto the site. There are water lines there now, obviously, but we had to relocate them. And the second is a new easement with Eversource to bring gas to the site. Thankfully, we were able to utilize the existing Eversource electric easement, and we are not requesting any revisions or changes to that.
Great. Okay. Questions for David?
Just one, thank you, David. Just curious, so the Millport site is actually owned by the housing authority, is that right?
Yes, and that created a little bit of confusion on our side because we had developed, we had assisted the housing authority with the Millport project and hadn't gone through this step because the housing authority actually does own the land there. With this site, the town actually owns the land.
Did the town, and I don't know if anybody knows the history, but did the town deed over the Millport land to the housing authority way back? Or I'm just curious why there's a different.
I wouldn't know the answer to that question. The Millport, well, I do know some of it. The original Millport property, which was called Mill Apartments, was actually developed in 1947. And I don't know if the town originally owned that or not. There was then a couple of parcels that the housing authority actually acquired on its own and combined into the Mill Apartments land. And those were acquired by the housing authority directly without the town.
Thank you.
Nick, any further questions for David?
Yeah, David, with respect to the existing water easement, is that going to go away since it's no longer necessary? And you've got a different easement, a different location?
We can absolutely ask Aquarion to dissolve that easement agreement. I agreed that it's no longer going to be necessary.
Right. That's all I have, Kev.
If there's no further questions, I move we approve the request from Canaan Parish Development to authorize the signing of these easements for Aquarium Water and Eversource for utilities needed for the project.
Second here.
Further discussion? All in favor?
All right.
Thank you, David. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, thank you so much. Really appreciate your help with this.
Back to Public Works. Bill Postman.
Morning, everybody. This is our annual blanket approval for the preventive maintenance contracts that we have in place. Some of them are proprietary and others are not, but they're there was a list. You should attach a list of everything, so I don't know if any questions, specific to anything. Pretty much a status quo on everything. Last year.
Any questions, Nick or Kathleen, about the items on our tablets?
None here.
Sorry, Bill, when you say it's proprietary.
Like the elevators, you have to have the manufacturer do the maintenance on those for liability reasons. So there's a few other items like that.
Thank you.
No further questions. I have no questions, so I move we approve this request from Public Works to enter into the contracts on our tablets totaling $129,926.65 for annual maintenance contracts covering fire, sewer, pumps, elevators, audiovisual equipment, etc.
I'll second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. Thank you, Bill.
Next one is for the blanket or purchase order. So basically we have preventive maintenance contracts cover preventive maintenance, should they discover fault pumps, what have you. If we want to repair right away, so we want to get the blankets covered so we don't have to pay additional charges for that. Again, it's similar.
Questions? Any questions, Nick?
Nope.
I move we approve the request from Public Works to enter into various contracts and purchase agreements for building repair services, and building supply purchases on our tablets.
Second here.
Further discussion? All in favor? That brings us to Linda for Rescue Act plans.
Sure. I just wanted to provide a brief update. This is an item that we've been discussing since towards the beginning of the year when the plan was in place. When I presented this to the audit committee, they suggested that I kind of start high and then get granular, just to provide context for those that may not be as involved with this. So essentially in March of 2021, the America Rescue Plan Act was passed. The total act was about 1.9 trillion and included things, stimulus payments and employment insurance, child tax credit, restaurant relief, and so forth. Of that 1.9 trillion, there was 350 billion designated for state and local relief. They called it the State and Local Relief Fund. And so these were distributed, the 350 million was distributed to the states under what? Billion. Yes, billion. Did I say million? Of the 350 billion, the state of Connecticut received 4.3 billion. That was the Connecticut share. And so each state had a process of how to distribute their share. What Connecticut did is because we don't have county governments, and therefore there were two pots, there was actually three pots. Towns that were over 50,000 in population, they were considered entitlement units, local entitlement units, and they received funds directly from the Treasury in DC, did not go through the states. Communities under 50,000, those funds flowed through the state, and New Canaan being one of them. And therefore, for the funds that flowed through the state, the process that the state had was they identified based on population how much each town would get. And then there was also a county portion of that funding. And so because we don't have government counties as government units, they distributed a county portion to each town within the county based on population. So New Canaan is 2% of Fairfield County. We get 2% of the Fairfield County allocation based on that. And so that's where we are. And so for the town of New Canaan, total amount we got was roughly $6 million. Of that, about 4 million was that passed through down through the county allocation percentage that came to Fairfield County. And then the town's allocation was a little over 2 million. So combined, there's 6 million for the town of New Canaan. The way that the state is allocating this, they're doing it in tranches. And the first tranche is 50% of your allocation. So in our case, $3 million. We are to get that by June 30th of this year. And then the second tranche, we would get 12 months from the first. And so within the next 12 months, we'll get the second allocation. The way that these are being administered is unlike the previous COVID funds where they were reimbursement for expenses. These are actually grants similar to CBDG grants. And therefore you get the money up front, you have a certain time frame to spend it, following these criteria, and then you report back on what you spent it on. And so you get the money first, you decide what programs you're going to spend it on, and then there's a process of reporting on that. As you know, all federal funds that are received by local governments have to go through what they call the single audit for federal funds, and therefore these fall under that single audit. The threshold for single audit, I believe right now it's been raised to about 500,000. But for the purpose of this act, they said any community getting over 130,000 will fall under that single audit. And the goal is to have a proper accounting and auditing of these funds. So we will be getting $6 million of these Rescue Plan Act funding from the state. We already submitted for the first tranche of funding. I believe we did that a week ago. And therefore, the state informed us that within 2 weeks or so, we should be getting this. So we feel comfortable that we should be getting these within the next 2 weeks. The state has already received the funding from the Treasury for these funds. So there are certain criteria that you could use these funds for. The main ones are obviously they want to encourage the support for public health expenditures. And these are new expenses, not reimbursed. This is looking forward, not looking backwards for expenses you've incurred. So you could spend these funds on enhancing COVID responses, mitigating efforts, medical expenses, just getting yourself ready, beefing up basically your public health response. The other area that you could use these funds for is to address some negative economic impacts that were due to COVID. So these would be things if there are businesses that were impacted and whatnot, communities can set programs locally and can use these funds to address some of those impacts, including public health emergencies. You can also use these funds, and this is the only area where it looks back, is you could use these funds to replace lost revenue that were lost if you can make the relationship due to COVID. As you know, locally, we've been talking about what we did with parking revenues and how those were impacted. So that's one that qualifies. We know that recreation programs were impacted because we shut down the parks and whatnot. So we've been able to document what those lost revenues are. The federal government created a formula and they basically said, look at your last pre-COVID year, which in our case would be fiscal year 19, and then identify those revenue streams. So for example, you look at your parking revenue as an example. What was our annual parking revenue in fiscal year 19? They use a 4.1% increase inflator. Not sure how they came up with that number, but that's the number that they gave us. So basically assume that your income revenues would be growing by 4.1% annually. You compare that with what you actually received in that period, and that's how you calculate the lost revenue portion of that. And so we've estimated, just based on that calculation between those revenues, we've lost about $3.2 million or so. And they said you could go across section. It doesn't just have to be the general fund. So you could look at if we had lost revenue in pool or in other areas. So we included parking loss revenue, recreation revenue. Obviously, the movie theater was impacted. We provided some grace payment period to renters that rent the movie theater. And so we estimated those as lost revenue. So you calculate all of those things. I had actually asked if we could estimate interest earning revenue as initially when I'm a part of a GFOA task force that was looking into this. So they said they were going to get back to me, but I did hear last night that as part of this calculation, you can also throw in lost interest income as a result of that. And so that's significant. Just on the town side, last year's interest income, I believe, was $1.3 million or so. This year, we're like 200,000 or so. You can see what's happened to the interest rate.
Just income on the lost revenue.
Yes. So yes. So total interest income, what you receive versus what you would have received. So they're estimating 4.1% increase in interest income too, which is I don't know, but anyway, that's the formula. So the numbers that I had included, this was before the interest income was clarified. So that doesn't include interest income. So that would boost up the revenue and interest income. If communities wish to provide some premium pay to essential workers, that's also something that you could qualify just in recognition of their efforts and whatnot. You could do that. And then they've also included in this any new investments in water, sewer, broadband type of infrastructure moving forward. And therefore you could identify some of these projects and these funds could be used for that purpose. And therefore, so that's kind of where we are. How are other communities? Kevin asked me to kind of ask around what communities are doing to determine how to allocate these funds. So I did a brief survey of some communities in Fairfield County and outside of Fairfield County in the state. Some communities are creating task forces within the community. Some communities, some chambers of commerces have kind of started their own process to identify what the needs are and are providing that information to towns and so that determination can be made. Some communities are just using the funds as part of the normal budget process. So it's just another source of revenue. So you have a project, it's presented, it's reviewed throughout the regular budget process, at the conclusion of which, if the project meets these criteria, it's approved, and then this becomes a funding source for those projects. And so we have some time, I believe, to receive the funds now. We have until 2024 to spend the funds, but you do get them up front. So we will get the funds. We'll have the 6 million within the next 12 months, and we have a certain time frame to do that. Some communities have projects that already fit this criteria, and so we have some sewer projects and so forth. The movie theater, the roof would be one that would fit. And so for communities that already have those projects, It's just a matter of identifying this as the funding source. Instead of bonding, we'll use the relief funds because those projects have already gone through the process of review. But for projects that happen, because it's a lot of money for some communities. Some communities are getting upwards of 60, 70, $100 million. And so they have to think about how to plan for that. But I just wanted to give you an update of where things are. We should be receiving at least the first tranche within the first, before June 30th, because we've identified revenue losses. Those funds would go to the general fund initially, which would raise the fund balance, but obviously we would have the discretion to do whatever the boards choose to do with those funds. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, but that's where we are.
Said one.
Sure.
So is Board of Education factored into this at all?
No, Board of Education is separate under the, I believe our Board of Ed is getting about $1 million direct, but then they've also set up grant programs within that. And so it's possible that they're getting more than $1 million, but this does not factor Board of Ed.
So the Board of Ed gets their own share of the same plan.
Correct. So 6 is town only, and then there's a separate pot for the Board of Ed. Theirs is administered as grants, and that's how those would come in. They do flow through the town books, and then we allocate those to the Board of Ed, but it's separate from this.
So would that amount also be part of the single audit as well?
Yes.
Okay. So you would have some sort of oversight there as well?
Right, because their audit and our audit is one audit, and therefore, so we would audit all of their grants. We do that now anyway.
Yeah.
So all of their grants are also audited, single audit.
When do you find out what their total is?
I'll give Joanne a call. I'm not sure. I know that the initial 1 million is public, that's known, but then I don't know what specific grants or programs that they have that they draw down on.
Great news. Thank you.
Any question?
So Linda, we're going to get $3 million by the end of this month from the federal government, and we're going to get another $3 million next year. Am I understanding correctly that you believe that the town has experienced reductions in revenue collectively, whether it's interest, parking, whatever, that would, take up that $3 million in terms of lost revenue looking backwards, and that it would be appropriate to apply those funds to those lost revenues?
Yes.
And in fact, and indeed, the amount of lost revenues might exceed that $3 million. Is that correct?
Yes, now that we could factor lost interest earnings.
Right.
So factor that, yes, you could.
So
You don't have, but you could, yes.
we don't have to do anything with that money. I mean, that money is just basically supplanting money that we lost because of lost revenue because of COVID, right?
Correct. You recall we did this year, just education expenses. We did last year $1.5 million and another $400 million in special education, in special appropriation for the Board of Education just to address their COVID expenses. So that's $2 million that came out of the general fund balance, and therefore by replenishing lost revenue, you make yourself whole because we used fund balance to pay for that $2 million for the Board of Ed.
And that's on our nickel because it's funds coming out of the general fund, right?
Correct.
It's to support, even though it's for the benefit of the Board of Ed, that would qualify as an appropriate audit, expenditure.
Yes.
Okay. So that's the 3 million that we're getting at the end of this month. What about going forward? Is the expectation that we will continue to have, I mean, we're still not getting parking revenue in any material way. We've got presumably, movie theater, we've got other continuing, negative trends on revenue. Is the expectation that follow-up $3 million would be taken up by continuing reductions in revenue based from FY19?
So that's what we would have to decide, if we want to allocate that to lost revenues, or if we want to allocate that to new expenses. That's on us. That decision hasn't yet been made. But
Well,
it is,
I mean, presumably we could already, we already know or could quantify expected lost revenue through, I mean, the parking, for example, I think we pushed off to September 1, the commuter parking. And even then, we don't know, what the result is going to be in terms of usage. I guess my point is, I mean, do we need to proactively say, oh, we're going to get $3 million in next year? It's like, Christmas has come early. What do we do with that money? It seems to me that prudence would augur that, we just, maybe just see how things go. Is there a rush? I suspect not, right? I mean, I think you mentioned 2024 might be the
Right.
in which, you got to figure out what was done or what to do with all this cash.
yes, the advantage of applying these funds to lost revenue is that it goes back into your general fund.
Right.
And therefore, at that point, you have the discretion of using, it's your general fund.
Right.
You could use that for whatever. You could not bond for certain projects. You're no longer tied to the specific projects because you're not really funding those projects with this money. You're paying yourself for lost revenue, and then you're just using a general fund balance to fund for projects. If you're using the funds for new projects, then these new projects have to meet the criteria that's designated. But if, for example, if we said we've lost $6 million in revenue, all of that goes to the general fund, then you've satisfied the requirement that we've used these funds for lost revenue. Now you have $6 million that the town can spend on whatever projects they want without any federal restrictions, because you've already met the restrictions of replenishing your revenue.
Bingo, spot on. Yeah, to cut to the chase, my sense is that a year from now, we've got a pretty good case that we've had, lost revenue in excess of $6 million. And that all of that 6 million should go to the general fund.
Correct. That's a valid case.
Can you just clarify that? Because
Sure.
I'm looking at your lost revenue as 3.19 million. I know you didn't include the interest income, 4%, seems high to me, but
Right.
Is that, why do you think that we would have more than this amount plus the interest?
So because this is just as of this fiscal year. And therefore, because this carries us to 2024, I don't know what those numbers would be. But for example, if we continue to provide relief for parking, and therefore we would have another year of lost parking revenue.
Right.
If the interest earnings keep going down, so you could potentially grow, right? It may not be 6 million, it may be 4, maybe 3.5,
Sure. Yeah.
but there is opportunity. We would keep losing revenue, and therefore this number could climb if that was the case.
Right.
But we have to have the numbers. If it's not the case, then you
That's
can't
when the
apply to lost
projects
revenue.
come in.
That's when the projects kick in.
Great, thank you.
Linda, am I correct that there's one qualifier that you can't use these funds to reduce your taxes?
Correct.
So that taking the general fund, you can't indirectly use it to reduce your taxes.
Technically, yes,
Well, they
but
want you to spend the money.
they want you to spend the
They want
money.
you to
They
spend
don't
the
want
money.
you to lower taxes. Yes.
Right.
And that's the goal.
So I'm gonna have a meeting, we're gonna have a meeting on Thursday with Lauren Patterson of the Community Foundation, or
And Leo.
Chamber, Tucker, myself, and Linda, and discuss what the needs of the community are. Because there's a sense that some of this money should be going to losses or needs in the community. And we're gonna start to investigate that. I also would discuss it with the town council tomorrow night, because I think the town council probably has a role in deciding this. The Board of Finance, this is these are grant funds that kind of what the policy is, how to spend it, either for this board or for the Board of Finance. So we're investigating the process as our neighboring town cities are, how we should go about addressing this.
Yeah, I'm supportive of that, Kevin, but again, I'll reemphasize, I really think it's important that we make a reasonable determination as to what we expect you know, the long-term reduction in revenue to the town is going to be. I think the parking situation, you know, Kathleen, you mentioned, you know, we could face, you know, material reductions in revenue from parking for years, It could be something that will never change. I mean, we could, you know, we could see half of our parking lots filled for the next 10, 20 years. I don't know. I may be wrong, but I just think it's really important. You know, I'm supportive of new programs to the extent that we can, you know, that they are, you know, right place, right time. But I do want to make sure that we recognize the fact that this pandemic has caused reductions across the board in revenue to the town of New Canaan, and I think we should apply these funds to those losses first before we, you know, support new programs.
Although, you know, I would view the parking losses are not really losses because we're not assessing our commuters to use something they don't need. And all of our parking lots are paid for, even the lumberyard.
No, but it's revenue that we've counted on for years. I mean, it's and it's directly related to the pandemic. I mean, I can't think of anything more.
No, certainly the pandemic has changed the life-work balance. More people are working from home, and that'll probably continue to some extent, but it's hard to predict. It's no longer related to the pandemic per se, but now about the way that employees are able to work for their employers, offers much more flexibility to work from home. Like, again, it's more of a change in the dynamic of work-life balance that was sort of brought together because of the pandemic. With the pandemic hopefully behind us at some point, it's going to be maybe more of a change in culture in terms of what employers are willing to do, let their employees do.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Linda, for that fabulous update. Are you going to give the same update to the town council?
Yes.
Okay, that brings us to the next item on our agenda, number 11, full-time employee. Cheryl?
Good morning. We have had an opening in the tax collector's office. This is a union position, so we did have to post internally. We had 4 candidates that put their applications in. We interviewed all 4. I would like to present Jennifer LaFond. You do have her resume on your tablets. She has most recently worked with the health department over the past year, helping Jen with the COVID clinics, also helping with testing. She has also served on the Board of Education. I think when you look at her resume, it's quite impressive. I do believe she would be a great candidate for the tax collector's office, and I would like to present her to start working there next week.
Question?
Cheryl, was that an open position because someone left or retired?
Someone has left, relocating to Florida.
Thank you. Looks like a great hire.
Yeah.
I move we approve the request from Human Resources to hire Jenny LaFond as a tax clerk in the tax collector's office. Second.
Second.
Okay. Kathleen, second. Discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Appointments to the Board of Finance. I see we have Victor on here, and
Yes.
we are recommending the appointment of Victor Alvarez to become a regular member of the Board of Finance, filling the term of our soon to depart friend George Blauvelt, moving up to West Hartford, and the term will expire on November 15th, 2022. This is subject to town council approval tomorrow night. It's on your agenda. So, questions about Victor? Appointment?
Victor, thank you for serving thus far as an alternate. I think it's been just a year. Is that right?
It's been half a year.
Thank you. Great.
Yeah. And it's been a great experience. I've learned a lot of the inner workings of the town. And I think doing this sort of civic-minded work makes one a better member of the community. I'm learning all kinds of things about stop-loss insurance and federal refunds, and I'm really enjoying it. And Todd Livieri is a great chairman of the board. I've learned so much from him. So yeah, and it's a great experience.
Thank you for pitching in, Victor.
I would like to add we have a fabulous Board of Finance and everyone that's, we're going to miss George.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would move we approve it for the regular members.
Second here.
Nick seconds, all in favor? Thank you, Victor.
Thank you very much.
For the for Victor's seat, Colin Dobbin has been recommended by the DPC for a 2-year term expiring on December of this year, fulfilling the balance of Victor's seat. And that's also subject to town council approval. That's right. Joanne?
I think I just add that there was letters of recommendation from George Blauvelt and Sven England from the town council. So I think everybody knows Colin Dobbin, his resume is also included in our tablets, and he's a great contributor to the town, having served on inland wetlands for many, many years. And I think he's going to be a great contributor to the Board of Finance as well.
Even though he's a lawyer.
No, it's great. It's great that we're bringing Colin back.
Did I move that? already?
No, you only moved, Victor.
I move we appoint Colin Dobbin to the alternate role he vacated by Victor on the Board of Finance.
I'll second.
Kathleen seconds. All in favor? Okay, great. Moving on to contracts under $10,000 and 4 or 5 contracts there. We voted these. Never remember.
Not on contracts.
Just reviewing.
I just have one question on that. There's a bill for document scanning. Is this the same provider that we've used for? I know we've done it for the town clerk's office.
The different
so forth.
departments
Is it-
use different
They use
vendors.
different providers. Okay.
Yeah, they tends to be related to the software that they use.
Thank you.
Okay, and then legal fees on the tablets.
Just a general comment. Obviously, we've exceeded the budget for legal fees for this fiscal year. But Linda, can you remind us, what is the?
It's not all legal. There's other items in there that are not legal.
Right, so it's part of the legal fees budget, but then included in that are also settlements. And that's the big driver, that
Sorry, can you define that a little bit? Settlements.
legal,
We're not multiple settlements.
no, there's one, yeah.
uh,
There was one settlement that was reported in the papers. It was a personnel matter, and
I see, right. Okay.
so that's what's driving
Okay.
the increase. And so what we typically do with legal fees, at the end of the year, we will sweep all the unexpended amounts, and then we will make them whole. But total wide, the general fund itself hasn't exceeded.
Okay, and
But
what's the
that's what
budget for
drives.
next year? That's what I was wondering.
Didn't we reduce it again? We reduced 10% last year.
No, we kept it flat this year. So next year's is 300,000, which includes the retainer, and then plus those individual, Board of Assessments and whatnot. But we kept it flat. It used to be 330, I think,
Went
2
from
years ago.
350 to
350 to 330, and then we've kept it
Under-
at 300.
Okay. Thank you.
So I move we approve the legal fees.
Second.
That brings us to Selectmen's comments. We concluded the agenda. I would just mention a few things. So we have a regularly scheduled meeting next week on the 22nd, which is a year-end meeting. We really couldn't figure out why it was 22nd instead of the 29th, but we don't feel that we need the meeting next week. We may need the meeting for the 29th, which will become a special meeting. So we will decide next week whether we need a special meeting on the 29th.
I had sent an email out to all three asking for feedback on those dates. Kathleen, you had asked if we could accommodate the 28th. Would be a better option for you. Nick,
Since it will be a special meeting, we can schedule it next week.
Okay.
We don't even know whether we're going to do it.
Right.
That should work, Tucker.
the 28th?
Okay, that then our COVID vaccination numbers are over the moon. They reported every Thursday by the state, and they no longer issuing weekly updates, but the over 65 are now 99.5%. The 12 to 44-year-olds are 93%, and the 45 to 64 to 85%. The overall total population is 173.07, and that's the highest in Fairfield County. And all this is thanks to Jen Allison and the fabulous vaccination effort, which concluded last week. But the health department still has all 3 vaccinations for anybody who wants to go to the health department to get one. And we continue to do outreach to our restaurants and our local employers so that everybody who wants vaccination shots to get it. And that's, as I said, we stepped down also our COVID testing. I don't have a report this week for the reason I have a case this week, but last week was 1. Obviously, the incidence of the virus is extremely rare in the county. Last week, the police department building committee met and heard a presentation about a proposed renovation of the South Avenue building. The consideration of alternative sites to renovation is something that I plan to bring to the Board of Selectmen and the Town Council and Board of Finance somehow together and decide how to do that. So we will look at that for early July. And we are working on the Playhouse renovation plan and hope to bring that to the Board of Finance for approval in the July meeting of the Board of Finance. That covers what I'd like to update on.
Do you want to say anything, Nick, or you want me to jump in?
Go ahead.
Okay, just, first of all, I want to thank you as our first selectman and taking the leadership position that you did in terms of the COVID testing and the vaccinations and so forth. So culmination of all your great work and the team's work, and I want to thank you for that. So
Thank you. Thanks.
I just have 2 quick things. One, on June 6th, I was invited to walk through Kiwanis Park Sunday, and I joined 3 members of the Parks and Rec, Carl Mason, Francesca Scallis, and George Bennington, along with about 6 neighbors and families around Kiwanis Park. It'd been a while since I'd been there. We used to have the DTC barbecue there once a year, but also when my kids are now a lot older, but I used to take the kids there many years ago. And it needs some attention, I think, is somewhat of maybe perhaps a little bit of the redheaded stepchild of all of our wonderful parks. And so Carl Mason has done a nice sort of summary of the findings of our walkthrough. And I encourage you to take a look at it because I think it's very interesting. And I think there are some things that I talked to Tucker about it. If we can help prioritize some of these things, I think some very nice things can happen at Kiwanis. I think since that walkthrough, Tucker, correct me if I'm wrong, Tiger, correct me if I'm wrong, a couple of these things that Carl has raised in his note have been done in terms of some maintenance things in the last week too. The sign has gone up, et cetera. So a lot of this work that he's mentioned, you are working on. So I appreciate that.
That's correct. I drove through Sunday. I was impressed by what I saw. So I think
They have jumped on a lot of.
John had done a number of things in springtime.
Correct.
So
They were trying to address all the concerns that they had from a previous meeting, and then to this meeting as well.
Yeah, the biggest one I think is the fencing, which we as a body approved here and several months ago, I think, and if that hasn't been done yet, so hopefully that's going to be in short order. The fence around the play area will be replaced. So
The contract's been released, the materials are being procured, will be out there shortly.
great, that sounds terrific. So one of the, I guess, advantages or potentially disadvantages of being a selectman is you get invited to attend lots of things. And also on a Sunday, I was invited this past Sunday to meet in front of the library with supporters of the 1913 library. And so as I do get invited to many things, I attend everything. And so you weren't invited. Oh, I'm sorry. We'll have to make sure they do that. But I went after church and there's been a lot of blowback about it. And I just want to say that I support and I've been consistent about this. I support the new law. First of all, I support the Planning and Zoning Commission and the work they're doing, very good work that they're doing in terms of the determination of the future of the library and the 1913 library. And second, I absolutely support the new library, always have. We've been donors in terms of the capital campaign and continue to support that. Third, I also support preservation. I've been consistent about that as well, and maybe in some form. And I'm actually have been impressed with some of the ideas that have been put forward by the library in terms of moving and paying homage to the 1913. But the simplest one would be to preserve it in place. But again, I think making sure that every voice is heard and we're considering that. That's what I respect the process from planning and zoning, and whatever way they decide, I support. And so even if it includes demolition. So that's the process I've always taken. I'm consistent with that. If anybody invites me to anything, I show up. And I just wanted to, be clear about that. Someone said, well, mediating, and no, I wasn't a mediator. I was a facilitator of all of the bodies that came together, including the town bodies, the library, and supporters of the 1913 building. So that was the facilitation that took place in person. I have to say that it was very well done, very impressed by all of the participants, and I thank them for their participation. So just wanted to clear the air if there was any uncertainty, and I wanted to thank everybody for having an open mind to what will come forward. Thank you.
Thanks for those comments. Nick, do you have comments?
No, Kevin, I just following up on Kathleen, as you put it, the numbers on the vaccinations are, I think you said, over the moon. What a testament to you and the town and Jen and her team and everybody who's pitched in. It's been a fantastic effort, and wow. I mean, it's amazing. So kudos to all.
Thank you, Nick. I would just comment, Kathleen, thank you for making those comments about the library. I knew that the Planning and Zoning Commission was going to have a very tough time with this decision. I and Nick are supporters of the library and capital donors, and we want a brand new library building, and we need to get it under construction soon.
Yep.
So I hope find a way to satisfy all parties. And I thank you for the effort you did to try to, I think, bring people together on a tough issue. So with that, I think I understand a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Nick.
Thanks.
Bye,
Okay,
Nick.
everybody have a great day.
Thank you.
It's hybrid. I know the camera wasn't there last night.
No,
It's back.
it's a different